I'm going to do a little news review again. This is kind of fun, and it helps me to articulate some of the things that I've been thinking about. Okay, so here's an example of a classic, what I would consider to be kind of clickbaity title. The chatbots can't outsmart you yet. And this has to do with the Turing test. For those of you who are not familiar, Alan Turing, in his 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, sort of lays out, I think, an interesting thought experiment. He's saying, this was 1950, but he's saying down the line, computers will be able to trick a person into thinking that they are human, using just text. And this is an important sort of caveat of the Turing test, is that he makes sort of the parameters very, very narrow. And he's saying that this is simply an exchange of text, and that we're looking for a computer that can trick a human into thinking that it is a human, although it is just algorithmically generating responses to questions, things like that. Interesting idea. One thing that he mentions, which a lot of people forget, is that we're not really, when we say that something is thinking, as just sort of a personal aside, I would like to remind you that there is no formal definition of what thinking or intelligence is in any serious academic discipline. What is thinking? That's sort of one of the biggest problems that we face as we are trying to understand sort of the limits, both of our own cognition and of what computers can do. But if you understand sort of the theory of computer science, one thing that you will understand is that computers can only operate within formal systems. Computers, can only operate in sort of a world in which there is a yes or no answer to sort of every state in its being. And computers don't really understand what they themselves are doing. A classic sort of response to this idea that artificial intelligence is not real, or that it's not certainly not conscious, is John Searle's classic thought experiment, the Chinese room, where he's saying that there could be someone in there doing the calculations, but they are not aware of what's going on, right? And so that human intelligence seems to have this sort of X factor that is not modelable in an algorithmic computer, or sort of a discrete state computer. And so anyway, let's just go through this. First off, they're talking about how some AI got good at playing a video game, and that's fine. I think generally the first thing we want to note here is that in all of these cases, we are teaching a computer to do one very specific thing. There's not a computer out there that can play chess. There's not a computer program out there that can play chess and converse and learn how to do any new thing you throw at it in a way that a 4-year-old child is able to. Okay, and so I think it's really important that we consider that there are very narrow scopes that we expect computers and modern AI to sort of perform in. And in addition to that, most of the training for any of these systems is coming from humans. And so, in that sense, they are cheating. Uh, right? Does a neural network that knows how to identify a crosswalk? I'll use that as an example because I just had to identify which squares in a picture were crosswalks. And here's the thing: with all of this technology that they're trying to build, it is humans that are telling it what is and what isn't anything. So first off, we should have sort of a caveat on anything saying that, so does this computer know what a crosswalk is? Well, the answer to that is a strict no. A computer, this is trained to know what a human thinks a crosswalk is visually, right? But that is, we have no sort of clear definition. And once, a neural network does sort of can say reliably yes or no that it is seeing or not seeing a crosswalk, we also don't know how it is doing that itself. But the point being, you have to feed it thousands and thousands of pictures of crosswalks and things that are not crosswalks, and those have to be labeled in a binary way, yes or no. Yes, there is a crosswalk in this picture. No, there is not. And that's just not at all how human learning works, right? Ask any 4-year-old, this is not how you teach humans what is and what isn't something. The way that humans learn, right, about words and what things are in the world is nothing like what we are training computers to do. And so, yes, did a human train it to do this? Sure, yeah. I would say you don't want to get scared, and these articles are kind of scary, right? The chat box can't outsmart us yet. There is sort of a fear-mongering that comes here, but I think that this represents a pretty strong misunderstanding of the concepts at work here. And granted, they will continue to, train things to do very specific things, but at the end of the day, this is not general intelligence. This is training things with lots of basically brute force algorithms to figure out something. When they arrive at a reliable version of a neural network that can tell you that it's a crosswalk or not a crosswalk, or the letter A or not a letter A, it's doing so at the expense of, first off, a lot of human training, a lot of human decisions that are made before the fact, and then you end up with some sort of notion of what the letter A is and is not, which is indecipherable to a human. Okay, so this chat business, I think we have to realize that this is just confined to producing text. Okay. And that's sort of one of the things that is important about how Turing sets up his experiments. Is saying, well, okay, this is something that a computer can actually produce, which is letters, right, that combine into words, which combine into sentences. And so at the time, this seemed very exotic. This seemed like it was, impossible to do. But Alan Turing said, it's just a matter of time. Things are going to continue to get better rather than worse at this. But this doesn't mean that what we're pushing towards is any sort of intelligence as we understand it within humans. And so we get this, these ideas down the line that computers are going to start to be dangerous. And let me just say right off the bat that the way we use technology and the sort of things that we allow technology to take over in our lives are already to the point of being dangerous and sort of evil and sort of against humans. And examples of this are things like credit scores, right? That's already an evil AI, if you want to call it that, that exists and makes life worse. This is an algorithm that makes life worse for humans. The stock market, an algorithm that is sort of, removes any sort of element of morality or what a good versus bad idea is, and reduces ideas to a simple binary: is this making more money or less money? So the stock market, you could make a pretty strong argument that this is an evil AI that already exists, an evil algorithm. Let's just say that evil algorithms are all over the place. And at the end of the day, what we will end up with is simply algorithms. And is human thought based solely on algorithms? I think it's pretty clear that this is not true. And there are quite a few people who understand this stuff at pretty high levels who say, there's just sort of no explanation for how the human brain can implement computation on some level, but what's more mysterious is when the human brain seems to do things that are not modelable by an algorithm. And there's all sorts of examples of that I'll get into down the line. But whether something can talk or not, hold a conversation, that don't impress me much in terms of it being a single purpose sort of thing, and this is something is it going to get better or worse as we continue to train it? Obviously it's going to get better, but that does not mean that something is thinking or is intelligent. And we see this a lot also now. People are saying, AI is going to ruin art. And to that I say, well, it's going to make artists work a little bit harder to, make something that is recognizable by a human as being artistic, as opposed to simply just kind of good looking, right? And there is a difference between those. The same is true of, technology that could replicate the style of a Mozart piano composition or something like that. So you can feed into it a bunch of Mozart piano compositions, and it will spit out something that is original and sort of sounds like Mozart, but is not any particular Mozart composition. And again, that does not impress me very much, because it's not as though you have the brain of Mozart bottled in some sort of algorithm. The fact that you can make something sound like something else is not that big a deal. This has been available. Technology similar to this has been available to us since I believe the late 1980s or so. They've basically been algorithmically making stuff that sounds like other stuff. But that doesn't mean that you have sort of the creativity of Mozart at your disposal, because you simply don't, right? And this is, again, sort of the overhyped fear-mongering mixed with a sort of, it's fear-mongering, but it's also mixed with a sense that, it's out of our control, or that humans are about to become redundant. And this is a narrative that is very useful to people who have a lot of power and have a lot of money, but it happens to also not be true. There are certain things that humans, and only humans, will ever be able to do. And algorithmically, if computers are working with just ones and zeros, there are some facts of life that you have to accept. And let me switch windows to another guy, a name that I think you should become familiar with. The Emperor's New Mind by Roger Penrose. This guy is, pretty high up in his game, but he basically argues that human thought, it is impossible, it's fundamentally impossible for consciousness to be replicated through computation. So here's another one from him. Consciousness is not a computation. And there's some really strong examples of this. One of them that he discusses in this video here is, let me show you, just a short clip here.
The computer can work this out as well. But how do we know that this is true for any A and B?
So take the example of 2 times 3 being the same thing as 3 times 2. We intuitively understand this, but in a computerized formal system, a computer could have no way of fully knowing that itself, because this is a problem that sort of extends into infinity, right? You could try, 2 times 3. You could try every possible combination of numbers and see if switching the order makes any difference. But that you will continue, for a computer to have axioms or a sort of algorithmic way of finding out the proof to this equation is going to be impossible, because it will just keep churning through numbers infinitely. Another example of this that he cites, and this is a very interesting one, is tiling. Okay, so let me just show you a little clip from this.
What, you may ask, is that? Imagine a plane stretching away into infinity. The task is to decide whether it can be covered all the way out to infinity without gaps or overlaps, using different kinds of geometric shapes, or tiles. If we have just one shape of tile, say this regular hexagon, the answer is obviously yes.
Right, so you can look at a hexagon and you could say, right, will this cover the floor completely of my bathroom if you were using hexagonal tiles, right? You know the answer is yes. If you're using square tiles, you know that the answer is also yes. An equilateral triangle, the answer is going to be yes, but let's continue. Interestingly enough, these are the sorts of problems that a computer can never understand or have sort of an internal notion of.
And if the shape is this irregular pentagon, the answer again turns out to be yes.
I wouldn't have guessed that myself, but there it is.
But if the shape is this regular pentagon, the answer now is an obvious no. We can also consider combinations of tile shapes. If we allow the use of this 4-pointed star as well as the regular pentagon, then the answer is now yes. Though we do not ever literally cover the infinite plane, when we see enough of the pattern, we can become confident that it will cover the plane.
And that's sort of the important thing there, right, is that we can say, well, it's good enough, right? With the same issue of 2 times 3 versus 3 times 2. We get a hunch after trying it a few times that it's going to be true all the time, even though we don't know for sure, right? And that you would have to, compute this out into infinity, which is, of course, not something we want to do. We want problems to halt, right, or stop. We want algorithms to come to an end rather than compute forever, right?
We can see this. Could a computer be programmed to answer correctly yes or no to the question of whether a particular tile shape or combination would cover the plane? Being algorithmic in operation, it would have to have a program, rules to follow. What might they be? It's noticeable with the examples so far that where the shapes successfully tiled the plane, in doing so, they created repeating patterns. This insight could be programmed into the computer. It would know to answer yes if it detected that the pieces could be arranged in a way that produces repeating patterns. But does the answer yes occur only with shapes that create patterns that repeat? Look at this pair of shapes. The answer is yes. The shapes cover the plane, but they do not create a repeating pattern.
And so then he goes on to, illustrate that this is just something that we run up against in any sort of formal system. And I use the term formal system, any system that can be modeled with ones and zeros on a computer. And so this is another thing that's kind of important to note is that, modern computers, right, all use electricity, but the same computation could be carried out by all sorts of different things, vacuum tubes, blasts of air, even well-trained pigeons could be trained to do the same sorts of computations that computers can do. That being said, right, the pigeons aren't aware of what sort of computation they're doing, in the same way that the guy in the room, in Searle's Chinese room thought experiment, doesn't really know what he's doing. Nonetheless, it seems as though there is a conscious entity answering the questions, although he's just following the rules from the algorithmic rule book. Most notably, this has also been made true. It's been shown to be true by Kurt Gödel in his incompleteness theorem, which basically states that any system of mathematics which we consider to be able to do all sorts of arithmetic, so addition, subtraction, multiplication. Any sort of system like this, if you carry it out far enough, is going to contain contradictions, that is, statements which are both true and false. And that's a really big problem, that there will be these sort of contradictions in any sort of formal system as it's modeled on a computer. This means that there are things that humans can sort of know to be true, but that cannot be proved within an axiomatic system, or a system in which algorithms, there is an algorithm that proves certain truths within the system. And I don't know, people just seem to not be acknowledging this. That there's just some other way of, making computers more intelligent. But we're just going to keep banging our heads against the wall against this problem until somebody really is acknowledging what's going on here. And all these people saying, oh no, Chat GPT is going to be able to write papers, and how are professors going to be able to grade these papers now that students can just get a program like this to churn this out? I guess to that I would say it's your job to make your assignments a little bit more interesting. It's your job. It is the job of educators to show humans what they have going for them against algorithms. Okay. Human thought is not algorithmic, although we do use algorithms. We could say that, for example, human language is appears to be a computational system, but it says nothing about how we use a computational system to create grammatical sentences, syntactically correct sentences, but we don't understand anything about where these ideas come from, what sort of generates these grammatical sentences that we're able to produce. And we know that we produce grammatical sentences that have never been said before in the history of humanity all the time, right? That's just a basic aspect of human creativity. And you should read, Noam Chomsky's book entitled Cartesian Linguistics. I think is a good place to start to understand sort of what we're really looking at when we look at human creativity. And this is a very clear and I think stark example of something that's not able to be modeled by a computer and does not seem to be algorithmic. There's not sort of a experience does not tell us how to make new sentences. We seem to be sort of pre-programmed to be able to make novel sentences that have nothing to do with our own previous experience. And so that's one area where Chomsky, I think, really sort of slayed a beast. The beast being behaviorism, by people like B.F. Skinner, who says that all human knowledge and all any sort of action that a human does is based solely on all of the things that we have sort of seen and experienced thus far. But here we see, right, a very clear example with human language of people doing things. We are not, for example, given a big book of every sentence possible and when you might want to use it. We are making free and creative sentences all the time, and we are saying things that are not forced out of us. We are saying things that are not just a reaction to the world around us, right? And so that's something that modern science has no good answer for, right? And they sort of skirt around this issue by saying, well, we can model human language, but they're not really modeling human language. These sorts of devices, if you gave it something that wasn't human language and that wasn't grammatical, it would still just keep churning out reactions to it, which I think illustrates the point. It is while this makes something that looks like human language, there is no sort of internal notion of what a grammatical sentence is. This is simply an engineering feat, and is mostly just a matter of statistics. Okay, and I would say that none of these AIs have any sort of internal sense of what they're doing. This is about as sort of algorithmic as you can get. And this is just, it works like clockwork, but is modeled, within a computer. And it doesn't impress me very much. And I hope that if you understand something about how these things work as well, that will help you to understand that the future is very much human. Do not let them fill you with fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But more than ever, we need to acknowledge what it is that we uniquely can do. And these are remarkably actually simple things. Just look at a young child growing up and sort of the things that a young human is able to understand about the world without being taught. And you will see that not only are we a long way off from these sorts of things being modelable by a computer, there are many things that simply are not algorithmically able to be modeled that we do. So I hope you can relax. I would say check out Roger Penrose's The Emperor's New Mind on YouTube. There's a book, an accompanying book. But it's funny, he spends about the first, this is what, 47 minutes long, and for the first, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes, you start to think, oh yeah, computers are on the verge of doing everything. But then he says, actually, no, there are some really simple things that we can do that a computer cannot and will never be able to do. Here's Kurt Gödel, right? You need to look into what Kurt Gödel established with his incompleteness theorem. But it's in some ways very reassuring, because it means that human thought and what we're doing here on the planet is not just algorithmic, right? That we have the ability to see things. There is computation probably going on in our heads, but that computation gets sort of collapsed into a sort of analog form, right? That there's probably multiple levels of things going from sort of analog to digital to analog again. But that in the process of performing any kind of computation, you do lose information, right? You have to compress things in certain ways, and so our notion of a tree or of the moon or of anything else is going to be limited, right? We can't, whatever is in our head can't be the actual moon, and although we can make models of it that are pretty accurate for various purposes, ultimately there is information lost in the conversion of one form of information to the other. And I think that's kind of at the heart of how we should be looking at these problems, is that there is going to be a loss of information, although we can model things with numbers. At the end of the day, the world is strangely intelligible to us, and not so sort of mechanically intelligible to the machines that surround us. So be careful about what you allow, be careful with what sort of power you allow machines to have over your life. I think everyone wants their life to be more convenient. Here you can see I have a tab open also for electric cars. Self-driving cars may have a climate change program, as if this is a surprising result. MIT researchers say that computers that power self-driving cars could have a large footprint. I've known this for a while, that electric cars, you don't want, if you have a self-driving car, you don't want it to be electric, because the computers on self-driving cars require a lot of electricity. So that's sucking an air conditioner's worth of electricity from your car, in addition to the work it's already doing. And these don't even work very well, let's be honest. Self-driving cars, I wouldn't trust them. And there's all sorts of examples online of people who do trust them and have big problems as a result. So maybe I'll cover this one down the line, but just something to think about. Chatbots cannot outsmart you yet. I would change this to chatbots will never outsmart you. A computer will never be able to do what humans can do. And people who really understand this I think would agree with me. So let's focus on what humans can do. We have something very special going on. Many would argue that there's, consciousness and things like this are sort of, this is an unformulatable problem. This is not something that humans will ever really be able to figure out. And yeah, what's the point? What's the point anyway, right? Is it not fun to be a human and to be enraptured in the mystery around us? Not to say that we can't understand things about, thought and how it works, but so far we are a long way away from understanding. There are very mysterious things at work, even in human cognition. So let's make the world more human.